name is Andrii Degeler. I'm going to be the host of this stage today. We have a great lineup of speakers for the next 4 hours. Please stay with us. But before we get to those speakers, you will actually have to listen to me because my talk is the first. So if I can have the presentation on the slides. Thank you very much. So once again, today I'm going to be talking about Ukraine and Central and Eastern Europe, their tech scenes, and the way the tech scene of Ukraine and Central and Eastern Europe is represented in international technology media. Before I start, I would like to also tell about myself just a little bit, who I am and why exactly I'm talking about this. I'm a journalist. I've worked as a technology journalist since 2007. I was born and raised in Ukraine, but right now I'm living in the UK, working as a contributing editor contributing reporter at Ars Technica UK, also writing occasional stories for the Next Web and the Kyiv Post. And apart from these gigs, I have also been running a newsletter which is called Proceed, and today it is exactly 1 year old. Just on April 20th, 2015, I sent out the issue number 0 of the Proceed newsletter, and since then the 50 issues have been sent out, which contained more than 1,500 links to different news items covering Central and Eastern European tech in different media. The links were both in English and in local languages, and the reason for this is that many of interesting stories in Central and Eastern European countries are only reported in the local languages and are not reported by the mainstream media. And this is also one of the reasons why I am here on this stage talking about it today. So 1,500 stories, of them about just 1,000 stories were in English, and this is about how they are divided between countries and between different categories. As you can see, Russia here is a huge leader, and in just a few minutes I will explain why it is so. Then comes Ukraine, then comes Poland, then comes Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania. The Baltics is a one chunk basically, and then all the rest Central and Eastern European countries. For the purpose of this analysis, I divided the stories into 6 different categories. First one is non-news items, which is features, reports, all kind of long reads, all kinds of stories where you have to dig deeper, and the stories that are basically timeless. Then come startups and ecosystems news stories. These are about companies, about startups, about ecosystems, about accelerators, incubators, and all that kind of sort of things. Then come funding and M&A news stories, which are both about CEE startups receiving funding and about CEE investors actually investing in other companies. Then come the big companies news and the low policy and government news, and then the other news. So these are all the stories in English, about 1,000 per year, that were linked to from the Proceed newsletter. But put it into perspective, here is the catch, because almost 3/4 of all this news were actually reported by English language media that are niche. And by niche media, I mean those websites that would be focused either on a certain geography, like Ukraine, or as it is with Arctic Startup on the Baltic states, or as with Bitspiration, they would be focused on Poland, like any one country, or any one sub-industry, like 3D printing, for example, or e-commerce. And at the same time, about 1/4, just 27% of the stories were actually reported by the English language media that are household names that we all know, the ones like the Next Web, TechCrunch, Ars Technica, Tech.eu, Wired, and so on. There is like a list of about 15 names. Today we are going to be actually talking about the mainstream media. The way how mainstream media write about Central and Eastern Europe looks about this. Once again, Russia is a huge leader, and once again, I'm sorry for delaying it, but you will understand why it is so. And then come Ukraine, Poland, Romania, and the others. Just for the sake of clarity, I made another slide removing Russia from there, just to see how the situation is starting from Estonia. So as you see, Ukraine is not doing that bad. After all, it's in the top 3. But at the same time, being in the top 3 means there were only 24 stories per year about different Ukrainian companies, about Ukrainian tech ecosystem. This by no means is a comprehensive sample, but this kind of paints the picture. So what I wanted to talk as well is how the mainstream media approach the news and what are they basically writing about. The blue ones is the division in mainstream media stories. The red one is the division between niche media stories. There are similarities, there are differences. Both of them write mostly the timeless features and reports, but then funding and M&A is something that is interesting for mainstream media, while niche media prefers startups and ecosystems news stories. And there are a couple of other differences that you probably can see on this slide. So they do tend to cover our region differently. So who is writing about CEE in mainstream media? TechCrunch is the clear leader, and then come tech.eu, then come the Next Web, then come Reuters, the wire service, which is not actually a mainstream tech medium, but they do tend to cover Central Eastern Europe a lot. Then come Bloomberg, another wire, and a bunch of other names. Who is interested in Ukraine then? Basically about the same guys, TechCrunch, the Next Web, VentureBeat, and another 10 guys who only ran one story about us last year. So if you want to pitch your company, think about TechCrunch and the Next Web first, just because it's more likely they would cover our geography. And this is what I promised, the way to explain why Russia is such a huge leader in terms of the number of stories. This is a very interesting thing. This is basically a media profile of each country's tech scene, which shows how different types of stories, how big a share they make in the whole coverage. As you can see, Ukraine, Romania, and Estonia are very similar in the way they are presented, but at the same time Russia is very different, and the main difference is that there were a lot of law, policy and government stories filed by mainstream media about Russia, because we all know what's going on in the country to the north of us. We know about the internet oppression, about freedom oppression and so on. There is no wonder at all that many mainstream media, international mainstream media, would like to write about this. So this is basically a fluctuation that will probably be over soon, I hope so at least. About Ukraine, you can see that again, features and reports make almost half of all the coverage, then come startups and ecosystems, then come funding and M&A. And looking at this slide, you could also say that Estonia as well has a huge green chunk of the law, policy and government news stories. This is most probably because of the e-residence program. This was a very interesting initiative by the Estonian government, which was very well covered and very well acclaimed by the media. So that's the reason why there is a lot of law, policy and government news stories in Estonia. So let's just rehash it a little bit. So normal story about Ukrainian tech would be one covered by the Next Web or TechCrunch, and it normally would be something timeless, a report, a long read, a feature story. But 2 stories per month is not enough at all. And again, since I track Ukrainian stories, since I read local media, I know how many stories go unreported on. And the reason, there are a few reasons for this, and I'm absolutely sure that Ukrainian startups and Ukrainian big IT companies can do much better than that, and that we can do something to change it, to make the coverage much more comprehensive. There are 3 things to know if you want to get your company, if you want to get your product covered by mainstream media. You need to know your media, you need to know your strength, and you need to know your audience. Knowing your media is something I do hope I have helped today with just a little bit. You need to know, you need to do your homework as well. You need to do your research. You need to understand what kind of media covers things you do, what kind of media covers our geography. You also need to know your strength, and by strength I mean that any startup, anyone who makes a product, any company, have something that can be seen as a treasure trove. By media. Basically, you have data, or you have experience, or you have knowledge that you can comment on the different questions with, that you can leverage when you are pitching the mainstream media. Just think about it and understand what exactly you can interest the media with. And the third one is knowing your audience, and this is something very important, because you need to know your audience and need to know your goals, first of all, because if, for example, your goal of getting coverage is generating more leads for your business, you need to know exactly what kind of audience you are targeting, and then you need to know what kind of media would serve this audience, first of all. Or else you will get the coverage you want, but your target audience will not read it, and this could be a problem. This will just be an empty effort that will not lead to anything. And after you understand that, pitch away, don't be afraid. I do think that a few entrepreneurs from Ukraine are sort of afraid. Just don't go around and pitch enough journalists. Don't be afraid. There is a very good chance that if you know your strength, your media, and your audience, you will be at least considered as a potential story. I'm absolutely sure of that. And while we were talking a lot about the mainstream media, don't forget about local media, about niche media. They are still your friends. They still generate 75% of the stories. And many stories that get covered by mainstream media, they are actually sourced from this local media. For Ukraine, the leaders would be UADN, which ran at least 60 stories on Ukrainian tech scene within the past year, and I'm pretty sure that they ran much more than that. But I don't take everything they do. And then the Kyiv Post ran a lot of stories. They have pretty great IT coverage since the end of 2014. Then the Go Europe is a CEE-focused niche medium, and 150sec is another CEE-focused English language medium. When you are thinking about press coverage, don't think of your niche, your local English media. Don't make it an afterthought, basically. You do want to pitch them, you do want to come up with angles for them, and you do want to have their coverage, because it may lead to very good consequences in terms of coverage for your business. So this is about it. More data will be on GitHub soon. If you want, you can ask me in an email. I will send you the data. You can tweet at me at Shlomo, and I am very glad to get any questions from you. Thank you. So we have someone with a microphone, and if anyone has a question, just raise your hand, please.
Hi, Andrii. I'm Alexei from Deposit Photos. And my question is, do you think that in recent years the main tech media have lost the interest to the M&A news, and they more cover like more pop news than something niche, and they almost had no interest in venture news, about investments and the stuff. So they are more interested in the stories that can be interesting for wide audience, not just for tech guys. Thanks.
Yes, I think this is the case. For example, the Next Web, which I work for sometimes, they do not cover funding news at all. And this, I guess, is something that tends to happen with the other publications, except TechCrunch, which covers, it seems like, all the funding news that are out there. So yes, this is the case, and if you want to interest the media in your story, just a funding round won't be enough at all. So we are out of time for the questions now. Just you can talk to me later in this room.